You bring up a good point, which is the UFO deception, and I think I would like your definition of it. It can be interpreted so many different ways, and it's something that you have publicly spoken on for years, and I love the way that you present it. So, what is your definition of the UFO deception?
Well, Jimmy, it'll probably come out different than when you've heard it before. I don't have a set, outline for doing it, but basically, because of what I worked on with Dr. Teller's group, I know that we have anti-gravity and a lot of other technologies that the world at large and public does not know about. When I say we, they did it before I joined the group, but Teller's group formed after the end of World War II. And what they did was they brought people, scientists, engineers, industrialists from various nations, eventually Dr. Sakharov from Russia, to several joint meetings where they decided, look, we now have nuclear bombs, nuclear weapons, and the next war, if we have one, if we allow it to happen, we know these weapons will be used and it will destroy the planet, throw us into global winter, and we will kill all humanity. We've got to get serious about convincing people to get along. And they knew that, for instance, Hitler had tried to force people into his new world order, the Nazi way. And the French underground had proven that would not work, because the tighter Hitler squeezed them, the more ambitious they became underground, blowing up bridges and hitting infrastructure, and he just could not control them. So they knew that forcing people into a one world order wouldn't work. They knew that negotiating at a peace table, like the League of Nations had failed before that time and the United Nations was being formed, but they knew that you couldn't get 196 nations, any two of them, to agree on a single thing in religion or politics, much less 196 of them. So they knew that by peaceful negotiation and by force, they couldn't hope to unify the planet. So that left them with what has been commonly called Alternative 3. And that alternative was and is basically, you need to give all of the religions, all of the countries, all of the cultures on the entire planet, the people, not the leadership, but the people, a common enemy that is apparently friendly but has the power to wipe them out. And I use the two brothers analogy, where when you were young fellows, 10 or 12, and you were in your room, you shared a room, and Dad was down the hallway, and it's nighttime, and you're supposed to be sleeping, and you're throwing pillows at each other and stomping on your beds and making noise. And Dad says, I've got to work tomorrow. If you don't be quiet in there, I'm going to come in and smack you. Okay?
Right.
So a few minutes pass and it starts again. So this time you hear footsteps coming down the hallway, and bang, the door to the room swings open, and there, kind of highlighted in the hallway light, is Dad with the belt, and he's going to kill you if you don't get along. And so, yeah, Dad, okay, bro, let's cool it and go to sleep.
Right.
So, sleep, everything's fine, it's peaceful. A common enemy greater than you has presented, and the brothers represent the 196 nations and their people on this planet. And the guy with the belt is the mysterious being who is not part of your crowd. He is from off the planet. He is advanced technology, so advanced that it's like magic to you.
Right.
And, this overcomes religious and political and economic differences all of a sudden. It's like 4th of July Independence Day, that movie, when the big mile-wide diameter ships all parked over the major cities, people have to come together rather quickly or they're going to die. The whole planet's going to die.
Right. And
it's that scenario, and it's built upon Alternative 3. Now, in the early 50s, in 1954, there was a NSA or NSC directive passed, number 5412, which formed the 12 men who would oversee keeping technology that we had stumbled upon and had traded with alleged alien beings from the public, and would oversee the development of underseas and underland bases all over the planet to develop the magical technology that we wanted to use to make a fake UFO, alien landing. But rapidly we changed that opinion in the early 50s, because when they met the real ones, deals were struck where they would be able to sample DNA things on our animals and some people, limited quantities, and in exchange we would get anti-gravity and various other technologies to help us with our intent to form a world government. Well, that agreement, that handshake, didn't work. Almost from the start, they started abusing their privileges to abduct people and to mutilate, livestock and animals, and to do DNA crosses and crossbreeding and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, it was not until the late 70s that our agreement with these critters fell apart. And when I say these critters, now I've not met them. I heard about them. I was briefed on them, but to my knowledge, I never met one. There are 3 types that I know of, and you're familiar, I'm sure, with the tales of the short little gray critters with big eyes, and then the vastly taller, thin ones with bigger eyes, and then the tall ones that are human,
right?
With fair-haired skin, and light skin and light eyes, and are if you move their hands or their arms in the sunlight, you will see kind of a rainbow shimmer in it because of the small scale-like structures in their skin.
Right.
Now, those are the 3 kinds that I had been briefed on. And as I say, I may have met one couple of them at a United Nations thing, but other than that, I don't know that I've ever actually met any of them. Now, they let us, or they asked us to build bases to help them build industrial complexes underground and under the ocean to build technology that they were supposed to share with us. But they started to do things without telling us, to develop structures and equipment and manufacturing that we didn't know about. So in the late 70s, they started actually kicking us out of our bases, and shooting battles ensued in various places, which you've heard of at Dulce and various other things like that. Where I don't know if we have any bases run by humans left. I think all these beings control everything now. They only needed Earthmen to build these structures, to make infrastructure for them to then take over and build weapons for a war that they're fighting with another being and his troops, which aren't on the planet at the moment. And we're just collateral damage. We were used to help set up their infrastructure to build weapons. It seems as though they were kicked out of where they were dwelling, which was like a parallel universe to our own. And they were kicked into this universe. And when they came, they couldn't take all their technology or their manufacturing complexes with them. It'd be like us landing one of our super jets on an island with a bunch of natives. We couldn't reconstruct our super jets without a lot of infrastructure to build semiconductors, chips, glass, all that kind of stuff. That's their situation.
Right.
So anyway, in my opinion, I tried to understand, where these beings came from, why they were preparing for a battle with a bigger alien, force or whatever. And when I studied with the rabbis, I suddenly figured out, okay, this is what the biblical prophecies were talking about. The fallen ones came out of the sky, which was probably some kind of a portal. They were gated from a parallel universe, led by Lucifer, Satan, and his minions, and they were cast to earth. And, of course, it does say that in the Bible. And in the last days, he'll be cast down to earth. And he'll traverse the earth like a hungry lion. There's a lot more to that story. But anyway, that basically tells me that what we are seeing in the first instance, when UFOs officially are announced all over the planet, the first wave of them, who come to allegedly help us, like in the TV series, miniseries V. Okay, the first wave will appear to be friendly, and it will help us with technology and medicine, and help us organize a global government, and how to protect the planet from meteor strikes. Blah blah blah.
Right.
And okay, so people that don't know any better and don't know that this is what's coming about will be deceived, and they will think this is, our creators. They are the ones that manipulated the gene structure of apes and made humans and made the Garden of Eden. And so, there may be even a production made in 3D holographic imagery where these beings say to mankind, look, Jesus, well, he was on the cross here. We were there, actually, and here's a video, a 3D hologram of the crucifixion, and he's one of us.
Can I jump
Sure.
in real quick? So the deception, our own leadership of each country that were interacting, they were completely duped then, and they weren't smart as they'd like to think they are. They didn't see through any of this, did they?
Well, not all of them. A couple, I think, did, and like McDonald, James McDonald, who committed suicide in a strange way.
Right.
And the Navy secretary, I forget his name now, but anyway,
Forrestal
out of the hospital window, and his notes all disappeared. These things tell me that there were probably a couple of people that were aware of what was happening, but could not stop the momentum of so many others that wanted to support it.
Well, and LeMay, I can only picture LeMay was the one screaming, "We got to fight these guys!" From the beginning.
We used to call him Old Iron Ass. He was tough, let me tell you.
And he was.
When I wrote the letter to get permission to drink coffee at the academy, it was it's a tradition. When you're a fourth class cadet, there is the senior classmen. You sit with a group of them at a table of about 10 of you, and at the end of the table, there's a senior cadet that is the table commander. And we had a particularly nasty table commander. I think he'd pull the wings off butterflies and enjoy it. But anyway, he says to us, the fourth classman at the table, he says, "I want you guys to get a picture of your girlfriend in a bikini, and if you do that, I'll let you sit at ease and drink coffee for one meal." And so I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so I didn't do that. A couple other guys did, and finally he says to me, "Deyo," he says, "haven't heard from you. Where's your picture?" "Sir, I don't have one. Don't have a girlfriend. Can't do it." "Well, give me, I don't know, picture or something from some important, Hollywood star, some important person." So I thought about it, and I said, "Yes, sir, I'll do that." And so I went back to my room that day, and I drafted a very brief note to the commanding general of the United States Air Force, General Curtis E. LeMay, and I said, "Sir, I hate to take up your time, but basically, here's the story, and I thought it would be kind of funny, kind of a joke on my table commander if you were to be my coffee chit, write me a letter to say it'd be okay, because you're important enough that I think he'd respect that." And so I signed it and put it in the envelope and went down to the mailroom on my floor. And the mail clerk says, "Son," he says, "do you realize that you're writing the commanding general?" I said, "Well, yes." I said, "It's just a quick note." And he says, "We had a cadet do that last year and they court-martialed him." I said, oh, well, give me the letter back." He says, "No, it's in the mail system now. I can't give it back to you." I think he was. Did you
ever meet LeMay?
No, I didn't. But he within a week he sent it back by airmail, signed, courtesy LeMay and everything, permission to drink coffee on Coffee Chit. And so I did slip it into my tunic there, and I waited for several meals until this guy remembered, "Oh, hey, Deyo, did you ever get a Coffee Chit?" And I said, "Oh, yes, sir, I did." He said, "Well, shoot it up here." So I pull it out and hand it to the upperclassman next to me. Of course, then we're all sitting at a brace, looking at our plates straight down and, eating square meals and all that. Anyway, so I hand it over to him, and the upperclassman next to me opens it up, and he looks at it, and he says, "Deyo," he says, "is this real?" I said, "Yes, sir, it is." And he says, "Holy cow." And the table commander can't stand it. He said, "Well, pass it up. So it goes up to the table commander, and he looks at it, and he says, Gentlemen, everyone sit at ease and drink coffee. this man has talked to God and lived.
Well, I always picture the reason why I ask is because in every movie where you've got that discussion going on in the Oval Office, should we or shouldn't we, and let's behave. No, there's always one guy chomping on a cigar, with a bunch of stars on his shoulders, going, let's nuke them, and that's all.
Love.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, Independence Day, and that's got to. I always picture that, that's based on LeMay. I think LeMay. Yeah, exactly. LeMay wrote the book for that character, and it's just portrayed in every instance when that scene needs to be written. They write in LeMay.
Yeah, he was tough, but he was fair. I got to tell you what, I really respected the man. There are a number of stories about things that he did to his men and with his men that just underline the fact that he was a cool leader. I liked him.
Now, in 1971, when you took the trip, it was to Australia, right?
Right.
With Dr. Teller. Was that when you were introduced to the development of flying saucer technology? Was it in that period?
Yeah. I was recruited in Dallas. I was approached privately by Dr. James R. Maxfield, and he was an associate with Teller on the project, and his office was there in Dallas. And he did explain to me that they were already way ahead of me. They'd had 3 different types of saucer craft, and they knew what I was doing at home in my private lab. And to be honest, someone had broken into my house, into my lab at the home a few months before that, so I suppose that's where they found out what I was doing. And I hadn't filed a patent yet, so it was still pretty close to the chest. But anyway, he said, look, we know what you're doing. We know that you're experimenting with anti-gravity, and we've already done that. We've already got a working craft, and we also worked with dynamic plasma craft and blah, blah, blah. And my jaw hit the floor hearing that first time in his office there. And he then started to move people and places and things to get me out of the United States with my family and set me up there in Melbourne, Australia. And that's when it started. And my control agent was a man that the Queen had knighted, Captain Sir John Williams, an older seafaring type guy, a tall, really good bearing, like a naval admiral would be. And he's the one that had my security files and everything about my shoe size and all that stuff. And he was the man I reported to there in Melbourne. He actually told prime ministers what to do and when to do it in Australia. So I kind of give you an idea of the power that they wielded.
Wow. I don't want this to get away from us. We're going to come right back to this subject in just a second. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, and we're talking with our very special guest, Stan Deyo. A variety of subjects tonight. We're somehow going to swing this around to some of the events that are happening in the world today. Right now, we're talking about flying saucer technology that Stan was involved in, and also the UFO deception. And I want to jump back, Stan, if you don't mind. You had mentioned our cooperation with ET in building infrastructure here on Earth. Now, Twitter just lit up when you mentioned that, about 20 questions in a row concerning the Malibu base. Are you familiar with the discovery that we did last May out here off of the coast of California with the underwater? We called it the alien base. Are you familiar with that structure?
Yes, I did see the video, and it was interesting and impressive. I don't know if it was one of the ones that was in operation when I was with the program, but one thing I've got to tell you is you don't actually have to have an opening for a craft to go through it. You can actually go through solid matter with some of these craft.
Sure.
So, but it did make a lot of questions arise to see that big cavern under there. I've heard rumors that we have a waterway that connects from the Pacific under the North American plate into Nevada, where we have a naval base there in the middle of Nevada.
Right.
Whether it's true or not, I don't know.
Well, and the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, which is in the middle of Nevada too, as well, just north of Area 51. It's a kind of a strange place to have that kind of installation. And then also, and you're right, because where that entrance is, the purported entrance, I should say, off of Malibu, you have Magoo right there. You have a Marine base. You have a naval installation. But if you keep going directly north in a straight line, you go to China Lake in the middle of the Mojave Desert, which is in the middle of the Mojave Desert. The Navy's largest naval base is in the middle of the Mojave Desert. A lot of people don't know that. It's an interesting fact. And then if you continue north, of course, you go straight to Area 51. And it would make a lot of sense that entrance would be there. Whether it's us or theirs, it doesn't really matter. It is certainly an interesting structure, and it doesn't look natural.
Yeah. We had troops or technicians down at the South Pole. I think they were mainly the Russian, the Germans who escaped World War II. After World War II, escaped down there to New Schwabenland. It is a well-known, well-documented fact that the Germans, before World War II started even, were sending ships and equipment down to the South Pole to this Schwabenland, which is New Schwabenland, which was under the ice cap, and it was like a valley, and they were colonizing it under the ice cap. Now, it is not really a stretch of the imagination to think that we continued to use that and joined with him after Admiral Byrd confronted them in that fleet that went down there and got miserably defeated by flying saucers. I know we had a base in that region, and I assume it's the same one, and we had one in the center of Australia underneath Pine Gap and west of there in the McDonnell Ranges.
Right.
Even our Aboriginal friends told us about the flying discs that came out of there in the evenings and mornings sometimes. So whose they are now, I think basically you can just bet that the super technology, the beings with that are the ones in control of the planet. And anything that moves that's antigravitic and more advanced technological devices is under their control.
You told a story once, and then we'll go right back into 1971, what you were doing in Australia. And this story ties into that. And you're going to have to correct me. It's been a few years since I've heard you tell the story. But you tell a story about a military demonstration with an actor. Oh, I just gave the ending away, I think. That's wearing a pack, and he takes off and flies. Can you tell that story for us? Because it's
it wasn't. Well, it was a short story that was written in the mid '50s, and of course, it was fiction. But I think it probably is closer to fact than you'd want to believe.
Right.
Because a lot of the corporations that were mentioned in this fictional piece is called Noise Level.
Oh, Noise Level. That's right. See, it's been a few years since I've heard you tell the story. That's right. It's called Noise Level.
Well, the whole objective of the story, of course, was to try to find how to convince scientists to overlook the noise of their education that says that you can't have antigravity. And the way it starts, they're in the Pentagon, and there's a meeting of high-ranking generals of various services there together at this table in this room, and they're called together. In the middle of the table, there's this tarp over something on the table, and there's a screen, a film screen at the end of the room, which they're watching a movie that's played there. It's one of those 16 mm movies in the old days. And the movie shows a young redheaded fellow, in his late 20s, it looks like, and he's standing in a football stadium up close to the edge of it where a bunch of generals and other scientists were meeting or sitting there looking at him, and he stands in front of him. He's got some kind of a backpack on wrapped around his waist as a belt to hold him and everything and, support him. And he adjusts something on his chest on the control panel, and he slowly lifts up 10, 15 feet in the air, and then he kind of lays sideways. and he adjusts some more things on it, and zip, off he goes around the inside of the football stadium in the air and back over to where they are without making a sound. And then he's going to do the next move, which is a rocket straight up, and he twists the button and poof, big cloud of smoke, explosion, but you don't hear anything on the video. It's all just, or on the film, because it's 16 mil silent film in those days. And, he falls to the ground and bursts into flame and dies. And they said, gentlemen, this fellow, of course, is dead. And he lifts the tarp off the center of the table. He said, this melted pile of metal and plastic is all that's left of what he was wearing. And we want you, particularly the corporate engineers that are here with us from the various, leading aeronautics corporations and physicists, we want you to back engineer what this young fella did all by himself. Now, we have his apartment, and we'll take you over there and you can investigate and see if you can find any clues as to how he did this. So they all go over to the young man's apartment, and they find libraries on chemistry and physics and metaphysics and gravity and magnetism and art and the strength of sounds in the Indian mystical religions and how they move things to float. And they find a chemistry lab and a physics lab and all kinds of stuff that he's been playing with, and they can't figure out what. And they look at the books, and in the margins of the books he's made notations and scribbles that don't mean anything. So they're trying to figure out, how did he do this? Where was his mind at? It's all over the place. So they think and they research, and a month goes by and nobody's done it. Nobody's figured out what he'd done. And one company, one engineer, physicist out in California, and his mate decide to go fishing for the weekend. They've had enough of trying to figure out anti-gravity that this young kid could obviously do. So they're up fishing in a stream in the mountains in California. And one of them is looking at the stream, and where they throw in the line and the cork bobs, it makes a ripple that flows downstream and keeps its shape but flows on downstream. And he looks at it and he says, I know how he did it. And they pack up their fishing gear, go back to the factory, and they work for weeks. It takes them about a month. And they call everyone, that is there at the company working, come look at this. And they have about a 6-inch thick aluminum disc, about 30 feet in diameter, inside the factory, and hooked up to some wires and things on the top of it. And they throw the switch, and doggone, that thing goes and lifts up about 12 to 18 inches and just floats there. And everyone is impressed. We got to go show the Department of Defense and all the other agencies. So they go back to the Pentagon, they go into the same room, and they have videotape of it, and they say to the people there, look, we've done it. We figured out how that little devil did it. He did this with waveforms and blah, blah, blah. And so the people hosting the meeting, the Pentagon, kind of smile at each other and laugh. And they say, gentlemen, we'd like you to meet someone. And at the end of the room where that film screen was, they move the screen and a curtain is parted. And there's the young scientist with the red hair, that was apparently burned and killed in the crash of his device. And they said, what is this? I thought he was dead. No, it was an actor that we hired to fool you, to remove the noise from your mind so that you could think clearly and without prejudice and go forward. And you have done it. And that was the story. And I just marvel at that story because it's so true. Our scientists.
1952 that was written.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
If you look through it, you can thumb through it and see, Luhara helicopter, and you can see see Martin before Martin Marietta. You can see Learjet.
Right, right.
All those people were involved in that, and from there I traced over to, in 1958, to the records of the New York Herald Tribune or Times. New York Herald Times, probably. Anyway, it's in the back of the Cosmic Conspiracy. I reproduced and typed out both the articles that I photocopied, and they tell the names of the same companies working on anti-gravity for real that was in noise level. And, I knew, because I'd been in the program, that's where it all started. And so the short story noise level meant a lot more to me than it ever had before.
And when you went to Australia, and I know you're going to enjoy my segue, nicely done, thank you. But the same thing happens to you, I would imagine. You go to Australia, and they hit you with this information, and the first question that comes to mind when they say that they've got 3 saucers and they've been back engineering and they're dialing in this propulsion system. What was your belief in ufology and UFOs at that time, and how did you wrap your mind around it?
It took a few months. It was an absolute shock to realize that we'd been doing it, but then I realized that there had been tales of these flying things before World War II, not only in the States, but in Europe and in India and some of the really old historical records. And I thought, well, those weren't ours, so there must be another crowd. And that's when, of course, I started asking questions, and there was not enthusiastic response from the higher-ups about me asking so many questions about this. And one of the things that really got me in trouble with the group, or at least, in reprimand mode, was that I said, look at all this technology we've got. Why aren't we making this public? I mean, you can own the technology, and you can use anti-gravity to help the human condition. You can use these power cells you've got here to give to the poorer countries. It's they can pump water and grow crops for themselves and live, and and they kind of told me in summary, boy, you just don't understand what this is all about. And they were right. And it took me quite a while, and talking to other members of the various departments of the research group, like security and people that worked in parallel projects, because we were very segmented so that you couldn't talk across departments very easily.
Right.
But after I left the organization, and this is an interesting thing, when we were challenged by these critters that cohabited the bases with us, Sir John said to Sir Henry one day while we were at lunch at the Melbourne Club there in Melbourne, they were talking across me, and Henry says to Sir John, he says, John, they're moving in on us. It's we can't stop it. And of course, I didn't know what they were talking about. I hadn't heard about the battles of the war or anything. And I said, do you mean the European Economic Community is moving into the Australian market, or the Western market?
Right.
And they looked at me like I'd passed gas at the table, and raised their eyebrows. And John turned to Sir Henry, and says, Henry, shall we go up to the cabin this weekend for a bit of hunting? Yes, that'd be good, John. And the conversation went flat from there on. And it was obvious that I wasn't going to get told what was happening.
No, you were not in the need to know column.
Definitely not.
How does that work, Stan? I've often been confused, because when you have different whistleblowers and researchers talk about top secret clearance and who had this and who had that, and you had a top secret clearance. Is that all there is? Is there, for once and for all, let's put this to bed, is there a 23 levels above top secret clearance? Is there anything like that? Or is it just it's top secret, and then after that it's just compartmentalized and you're on a need to know basis? What is really going on here?
There are more levels than just top secret, but they apply to a number of projects or operations, and for that level or for that kind of operation, there will be codes, clearances for that. And if you don't have those IDs, then you're not cleared for that. But there's not a classification level that clears you for everything. That's probably wrong. There probably is one. I don't know about it. But there were security levels above just top secret. I mean, top secret, we had that at the academy as cadets, but it's clearance levels on the projects that you're involved in, and they'll have strange names, and that identifies you, that and the color of a badge you're wearing in the hallways that are marked with colors. That kind of stuff tells you where you can go.
So in other words, you have your top secret, and then you have a word tied to it. I'm going to pick something out, car, and then you can access certain information in the car file. But just because you have something like car, that doesn't give you access to anything that you want. You can't walk into anywhere and open up a file cabinet.
That's true. And as I say, some of the facilities that we had down in Australia anyway, they along the hallways are big wide stripes of color in levels above, like stories of buildings underground, and also in doors that have colors on them. And you had to have on your badge, you had to have that color so that a security detail or anyone else for that matter that's cleared on that level, if they look at your badge and doesn't match, there were some levels that there was no shout to stop or anything else. If you were there, you were killed immediately. There was one of our assembly areas for the craft over in the empty quarter of Saudi Arabia in the Jabal Tuwaiq mountain range, about 120 clicks out of Riyadh, in the Ruab al-Khali. And there you could only approach in craft that were gravitic craft, and anybody on foot or in air that got within the no-go zone was immediately terminated. There was no questions, no excuse. You were dead. That they had. And there are some places that there's no danger of someone just wandering in orbit or in other places that are just totally inaccessible under the ocean. You just, you're not worried about people that don't belong getting into those things because they don't have the technology to get there.
Right. And it harkens back to Bob Lazar's stories about he went into a room. He was given a stack of documents to review and read, and he went through those. Did they do the same? Or is that how they exposed you to this, or how did they? Because this is, if to the wrong person, you would just go crazy. You would lose your mind. So. How did they disclose it to you?
Most of mine was verbal. Some of it was photographs in assembly areas of things happening, and I guess it's different for everyone. But when we started to lose control of our bases is when in the mid-'70s when I left the group. I'd only been there a couple of years, 2-3 years, and what happened was one morning Sir John's man who he's like an odd job in one of the James Bond movies. He was tough, and he was the Mercedes driver that would drive us around, Sir John and I. But he showed up on my front porch there in Melbourne one morning with a box of all my material, with all my data files that they had on everything. And he said, you're to have no more contact with Sir John or the group. You're cut off. And I didn't understand this. I thought it was because I was disputing, the use of the technology that we should share with other people. And then I thought, well, I've heard Sir John badmouth the Jews. Maybe they found out my father was Jewish, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So anyway, I was suddenly into civilian life again and had to scramble and find work and, live. And, things got a little bit more complicated than that. It forced me to go underground and to run and change my name for a while. Later, I found out that what happened was that not only myself, but at least one other guy that was in England, part of the group, and some others, they disappeared us from their records because they were being overthrown, and they didn't want the tale of what had happened to disappear.
Overthrown by who, Stan?
Well, these the satanic ones, the fallen
gotcha.
Beings.
Okay, let's clarify something else, because that was a very interesting point that you said earlier. You said they reneged on the deal. The original arrangements that were made in the 50s and 60s. But, the common legend or myth, if you will, is that we reneged. So you said it was them. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we agreed to accept technology and help from them in return for building the bases, and also in return we would let them do genetic experiments on living things here on the planet within reason, and there were limits put on them for that, and they almost immediately exceeded the numbers of and the types of things that they could do, and that was an ongoing issue with them. And as I say,
was one of the lines in the sand humans?
Number of humans, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Oh, wow. So we actually agree. Now, was that? Oh man, I don't want to go dark, but just stay with me on this. Was that experimentation on humans, or maybe just communication with humans?
No, experimentation, probably unbeknownst to our human counterparts in those agreements or contracts or treaties, was the fact that these beings were trying to make, like biological robots that they could control remotely, with their intelligence. Biblical students would call it possession by demons or whatever, but
right.
They wanted to make bodies, human-type clones that they could inhabit, in essence. They could override their senses and see through their eyes, feel through their skin, and that kind of stuff. But they were somewhere else, so that if the clone got hurt, it didn't kill them. They just would find another host. The problem with humans that already have an intelligence in the body, a soul or spirit,
sure,
is that there is resistance there, and you have to they would have to constantly fight that to use that person's body. So I think that was generally what they were doing, is trying to find a clean host that had no intelligence indwelling it, and to use that as a biological, robot. Or
I have a couple of
avatar.
friends. I have a couple of friends that would have worked perfect. That's another story. Let's back up for a second. With the disclosure that was going down, did you see photographs of those three crafts? I mean, that's the $1 million question. But
I saw photographs. I saw photographs of the assembly of the anti-gravity craft. I already knew about the dynamic plasma craft and stuff, because that's what I first started out working on. But the anti-gravity craft was inside of a tall, and there were a number of them in stages of assembly, inside of a tall building that looked like it had corrugated metal sides and roof, like in a hot climate somewhere. Could have been the one in Riyadh, or outside Riyadh. But anyway, there were photographs showing the toroidal rings that drive the thing before the lid was put on, and then a cross section of the toroid, which showed that it had a hollow square section for the main toroidal tube, and layers of probably a mu metal wrapped around it, plus flat copper, looked like copper wire coils that were, I'd say at a guess, 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch thick and about 4, 5, 6 inches wide. And these were wrapped like bands around that toroid, and wrapped around like you were wrapping a wire around a donut, following it all the way around. And then there was another set of these flat coils on the inside, the whole of the donut wrapped around it in the same plane. And apparently the two were connected by circuitry over an archway, like a bite in the donut or the toroid, where the wiring kind of looped up over and formed like a partial doorway type thing, but it was just to get over something that would go in that slot. Mm-hmm. And I knew immediately that worked because of what I'd been shown before I even joined the project by one of my, he's actually an employee, but a friend, Colonel George Dice, who had been a SAC Air Force aircraft commander. And George showed me before, like I say, before I joined the group, showed me on a blackboard what his navigator had shown him in the late 50s, something he'd been working on in his home and researching with electricity, magnetism, whatever, and he'd generated anti-gravity. which is kind of an interesting story anyway in itself, what happened to him. But I said to George, I said, well, where did you get all this diagram? So he said, well, he showed me the diagram, and then he gave me a sealed letter with that and other information for patenting purposes, and asked me to keep it to prove that he'd developed this. And I said, well, okay, where is that letter, or where's the drawing? He said, oh, it's with my parents in Florida in a box. I said, well, can you get the box? And so he rang, and no, they'd done a big clean out and thrown it all away a couple months before.
Of course.
Said, okay.
Right.
I said, well, what happened to the navigator? He says, a couple of weeks after he gave me that, he was transferred to another command, and I guess I never heard from him again. Well, what he did remember and what he did draw was an extension, the shape of the toroidal
coils.
Coil.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and the donut with a bite out of it, that toroid with a cut in it to make a slice in a washer, and the vertical rod where the navigator wound his coils. It was all the same planar
Design.
Orientation. Yeah,
yes,
same design.
Yes.
So I knew immediately when I was later in the program and saw that photo, I said, right, I know exactly, that's what they're doing. The same thing the navigator did. For all I know, he was on the project. I couldn't tell you for sure.
What was powering this? And I picture one of two things: either a lot of something or very little of something. What was going on with powering?
Well, they had it's probably about the size of a window air conditioner, maybe a little bit bigger. And this supplied the electricity to drive these smaller 30-foot diameter craft. I think that it was Lazar's explanation of how they converted energy from, he called it 115,
right.
115, but I think that's fairly close to what happened, because at that level on the atomic scale, there would be a lot of energy that you could mine or strip off of an element by bombarding it with neutrons or other particles. And so that powered the drives into the coil, and it also powered the steering mechanisms in the early craft. They were just a matter of two flat coils that were separate from the drive coils that were, they would be at right angles to the craft when it was sitting on the ground, and they would fold it over the donut. And it was very important to have the polarity. They were direct current, to have the polarity of those to each other in respect, plus minus. So important that when they were laying on the assembly floor, they would put a sign on these flat coils, steering coils, and they would put plus or minus, showing that when you wrap it around the donut, they had to be in a certain position to each other. Otherwise, when you fired up the field, it doesn't happen instantly. It has to build up over a few minutes. And if you don't have that polarity right, it will cause an inversion bubble, which will just convert all the energy you've pumped into that field and the crew and the craft to become a fireball. It will just vaporize, leave a hole there. So it's very important to have those correctly oriented to each other. You could take a Volkswagen engine in a car, if you wanted to, turn a little generator, and you could pump up the field in a craft that's 30 foot in diameter and lift up a multi-ton craft after maybe half an hour to an hour. And the reason is, it's not a direct drive system. It is a system that stores pulses of direct current in those two coils, the main field coils, back, forth. It stacks up energy like layers of an onion. And so a Volkswagen engine, something that small, could be used to stack up layers back, until you've got a huge amount of energy in a big field. And in these smaller craft, a 30-foot diameter craft, you would have a field that would extend maybe 800 feet in diameter from the craft itself. And like a bumblebee then, who creates an air bubble around him, and he doesn't actually fly. He steers a circulating bubble of air around him.
That's right.
And that's how the craft would then move and elevate.
That's fascinating. What would happen if I was standing next to the craft as it was warming up? Would it affect me physically?
Yes. If you didn't short out to ground and burn to death with electric discharge, if you were in the field and, safely insulated or grounded either way, I'm not sure how it would have to be, but if you're in the field, it would alter the physical and chemical processes in your entire body such that time for you would dilate. An example which did happen in South America, I think it was in Brazil at a Brazilian Air Force base many years ago. There was a sergeant, let's call him Garcia, and his men. They saw a bright UFO hovering just off the airstrip, and it was there for minutes longer than a rocket or something would be, and it didn't move. So they were sent out to investigate it when it apparently dropped to the ground. Well, they sent teams out, split out, and Garcia went by himself this way, and some of his men went that way. And they all regathered after, 15, 20 minutes to see if anybody had seen anything. Garcia was missing. He stumbles in a few minutes later. Now then, Garcia is disoriented. His watch is like hours ahead of, maybe a couple of days even ahead of them, but it looked like hours on his watch. The reason I figured it was a couple of days was because when he'd gone looking for this craft, he was clean shaven for duty, but he had a several day growth of beard on his face when he returned, and after just 20 minutes or so. Now what he'd done, I'm pretty sure, is he'd walked into the edge of the field, and it speeds up your physical chemical reactions and your mental facilities. It changes the rate at which time passes, in essence, because it changes all the chemical and physical reactions that we measure time by in your body. Now, for him, that made him age. Inside the field, in the craft, when it goes to turn a corner, the people inside are affected as well. If you're traveling at 15, 20,000 miles an hour in a straight line, and you want to suddenly turn a left turn, if you were to be able to do that in a normal vehicle without anti-gravity, you would collapse the frame of the aircraft. You would kill everybody on board with the G-forces and smash them to pulp, and they would die. On the other hand, if you were going to turn that corner, if you had a clever way to amortize or spread out the change of inertia as you go around that corner over a much longer time, say, take that corner at...
yes, finish. But you just made my head blow up.
Okay.
Yes, yes, you're you're taking the same corner slowly.
To you,
yes,
you're playing cards and having a cup of tea as you turn that right ankle. To the people on the ground, they look at you and they see you differently. They see you on their time scale where the bright light goes and
zings.
Suddenly
zings
left. But as it zings, there's a bright flash of light at the zing point, and then it's gone. You don't hear tales of these things turning long, gradual arcs at high speeds. They're straight line.
Right.
Ping, ping.
Right.
Because taking a turn makes you age.
Wow. Oh man, I need a minute. I just need a minute. Oh man. Oh man. Okay, I got a bunch of questions right here. I want to get out of the way, and
this is like taking the curtain away from Oz.
Yes, you've just done it. Okay. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, Bespoke Radio for the Masses. We are talking to Stan Deyo. Lots of subjects. We're talking about UFO propulsion, actually. And I would say that would be like time dilation, where you're in the craft, you're in a different sense of time. Therefore, that would be a total slow motion scenario where you could do, like you said, you could play cards and drink tea while you're taking this 90-degree turn. That in our reality, watching it would destroy us, and that's always the question. How could they take that turn? That's impossible. How could they take that turn? We would die. That is just an amazing explanation. It's going to take me a couple of days to chew on that. That was incredible. Thank you for that. I've got about 10 questions really quick, so let's just bang through this. These are coming in via Twitter.
All right.
Can Stan confirm the existence of the two ships from hacker Gary McKinnon when he released that data on?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Gary McKinnon was the hacker out of the UK that hacked into NASA's database in NASA's database.
I remember that,
Florida.
but I didn't remember about the ships. What did he say about the ships?
He said that he was downloading images, and he had two different file folders. One that was like labeled UFO fixed, and then UFO plane, or retouched and untouched photographs, and that clearly showed motherships parked in our, that were in orbit around Earth, and then the released NASA photos of the same image didn't have the motherships in them. But that's okay if you haven't heard his testimony on that. But that's what the question was about.
Well, look, I'd be suspicious from this time we're in now forward of all leaked revelations, because the way to make the formal announcement is to not do it at a government level, but to do it at the people level. Leaked information. The people rise up to say, look, we want these people, our friendly alien brothers, to help us rule the planet. We don't need the Illuminati. We don't need the politicians. Let's get rid of them. And so this is the underground pressure, the surge, the well is coming up. And so I am suspicious of these kind of things, of these leaks that they get away with now, because they're leading to the great deception when the presence is announced to the people of the world rather than to the governments. The governments are just puppets, and I tell you what, people that follow the Illuminati conspiracy theory are correct, but they're also need to know that the Illuminati, the great majority of them at the lower ranks, are going to be the scapegoats. They're going to be the bad guys that the alleged good guy aliens will free us from, and people will cheer. And, things will get better, for a brief time, and people will think that this is great.
Okay, well, Rick says, does Stan think the media is conditioning the public to make humans easier to invade?
Well, sure. I mean, there's a lot of things that show evil, frightening aliens, and there's a lot that show good, friendly aliens. The scenarios are being put out there into the conscious and subconscious minds of humans. And if anything, it is confusing. Which way are they going to be, good or bad, evil or good? And people are being conditioned for this so that when the announcement or when the arrival is made plain and the governments are accused of, hiding everything and are terrible and, all that kind of stuff, people will say, well, are you going to kill us, or are you friendly? We're friendly, and we're going to help you. People will believe that because they want to, and the apparent confusion of whether they're going to be bad aliens or friendly aliens will be cleared when they, present the offer they're going to make to the people of Earth. This is more to the people than to the leadership, because leadership you can easily control, blackmail, or do whatever you want to make them do what you want them to.
Yeah, that's how they run. To be honest with you, yeah.
And so it's not them that
Right.
Need to be convinced. It's you and I. It's the Buddhists. It's the Muslims. It's the Jews. It's the Christians. We need to accept our quote unquote elder brothers, who were the basis for all of the human religions. And we need to accept them as our leaders, and they will appoint a human leader so that we're not worried about whether it's a takeover. And, it's going to be, as the Bible says, a grand, great deception that will fool even the very elect of believers, if such were possible. And that's what we're told to be cautious, to endure, to watch for these things, and to not be caught up in it. But the media is conditioning us. There's no question about that.
Tammy says, Jimmy, ask Stan if he has seen the big dog. What is do you know what she's asking?
I don't know whether it's a metaphor, meaning like the Grand Kahuna himself, or whether it's...
I don't know. Hey, Tammy, hit us back with that. And we need some clarification because I love the question. Let's see. Ed says, if we have all this advanced technology, why are we screwing around and not just take out the terrorist?
Well, understand that with the advanced technology we have, it's being held back from the public. Mainly the really super stuff is being run by Satan and the fallen ones. They do not want the world situation to get away from the control of the Muslim terrorists in the Middle East. The new world order that they want to set up will be based a lot on Sharia type law, and the Antichrist will come from that area. His name will probably be a derivative of the name of King Solomon, Soleimani, something like that, or Solomon in Saudi Arabia. So the reason the technology is not being openly used by our governments is A, they are not allowed to by the real aliens, the fallen ones, and B, the fallen ones want to move human events in a certain direction, which really the terrorists are doing. They're eliminating our faith or weakening our faith in our governments and human institutions, and so people are crying out for someone to solve the problem. So the technology in the back room will only be used toward that objective, and there are things hugely more advanced than Star Trek. I mean, really advanced, and molecular physics is under a lot of it, but we can go faster than the speed of light. That's not an issue. There are just a lot of things that will be revealed, by the new world order under Satan, but he will be posing as a messenger of peace, love, and light, our elder brother in space, and so people will believe it because they don't want to believe the alternative. But that's what we're being steered toward, and that's why technologies that that we do have are not being made public.
What does Stan Deyo do if a Solomon next week suddenly is in the media out of the Middle East? What do you do? I mean, do you seriously start prepping? And I know you've already prepped, but do you become more prepper than a preppy? I mean, do you just pack up and get ready for it, or is there something that we can do?
No, about the only thing that I would suggest is that what we'll do here is repack our knapsacks and walking gear and stuff, and in case we have to walk out of our property into like a wilderness area or a national forest or something to get away from what's coming to the cities. But I don't think that we will be doing that alone. I really do think that the good Lord, the Messiah, will be here and will use technology to our advantage and will take us to a safe place, whether that is somewhere on the surface of the earth or up in the air, as it says in clouds, to a craft outside the planet. I don't know. But it will happen. And until that time, I think that Holly and I and a lot like us have prepared to endure for a period of time until we have to leave our homes, because we won't take the new currency number for the planet to buy or sell and worship this Antichrist fellow.
Right.
But there is a Solomon. There is a Solomon that I've got my eyes on. In fact, there's two. There's three, but there's one that stands out of those three in the Middle East. He is a Muslim. He is a general in the Iranian Quds forces, the Quds force. And even Daniel says the Antichrist will honor a god of forces. And this general's name is Qasim Soleimani, Solomon. And in the Middle East, the name of Solomon is as common as Smith is here in the West. But they revere the legend of King Solomon as having magical powers and working with the jinn, the magical beings, and having, great wealth and common sense and power. Solomon's actual deeds have been blown out of proportion by history. The it's like we treat the tale of King Arthur. You know, it's based upon Arturo, the Roman general that settled there in England when the Roman Empire fell. But the legends have grown out of proportion to what Arturo really did and how big his round table really was. But anyway, this is Solomon. He's revered by them. They're looking for Solomon to appear in this time to overthrow the evil state in the United States and Israel, to bring the world to peace. And they will follow him, and they will even allow the Jews at this point to build Solomon's temple, not Herod's temple, but Solomon's little temple on the Temple Mount. It's already been suggested in Turkey by the news media there that they allow Israel to do that, to worship God on the Temple Mount, but not up next to the Dome of the Rock or the mosques there on Al-Aqsa. So, you know, it can be done. They're moving that way. And the fact that they would let Solomon's temple be built in the wooded area on the north side of the Temple Mount tells you that they revere Solomon, a great prophet, and some of them even say he's a coming Messiah to the Muslim world. So, you know, it can be done. They're moving that way. And the fact that they would let Solomon's temple be built in the wooded area on the north side of the Temple Mount tells you that they revere Solomon, a great prophet, and some of them even say he's a coming Messiah to the Muslim world.